Good morning and Happy New Year. Our first task for you for this year is to think back about the book Skellig and to think about how Skellig got there in the first place. So at the beginning of the book, we have him sat in Michael's garage, covered in dust, covered in cobwebs and dead flies. He's clearly been there for quite a long time, not doing anything at all. In the book, through Michael and Mina's kindness, he's restored to something like what we imagine he was before. He's able to fly, he's able to heal people through what he does, including Michael's baby sister just at the time of her operation. But he's certainly not an angel in the traditional sense. He describes himself near the end of the book as being something like you, something like a beast, something like a bird, something like an angel. He laughed, something like that. So clearly he is a very interesting and magnificent kind of being of some kind. But at the start of the book, we don't see that. We see him as rude, obnoxious, grumpy. He just sits there, he doesn't want to do anything, he certainly doesn't want anyone to be close to him. So your job is to think about how he became that way, what happened to him. I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I think that perhaps Skellig was some kind of immortal being, someone who has seen it all and done it all before, who's lived through so many years and seen so many people come and go around him, that he doesn't want to get close to anyone, and actually is quite depressed by that. But he doesn't want to let people get close to him because he knows he's going to outlive them and see them eventually die. And so he goes into these sort of blackouts, as it were, where he just spends a huge amount of time doing nothing because there's nothing really for him to do in his own mind. So I started writing something. I'll read you what I've got so far. I've been alive for as long as I can remember. There was no moment of birth or growing up, just always being here. But there are gaps, big gaps, sometimes decades, sometimes centuries, where there's just nothing. I sort of retreat into myself, and it takes something special to awaken me. But when you've lived for as long as I have, and seen everyone around you come and go, it's hard to get close to people. They all die eventually. So that's the beginning of mine, and it sort of explains a bit about who Skellig is. But from that, I'm going to need to develop it. I'm going to need to talk about how he's not always been that way. And in particular, I'm going to have to go back to a time where he was more like the Skellig at the end of the book, that something is going to happen, that he's going to send him into one of these gaps, one of these things that sometimes takes decades, sometimes takes centuries. What we do know is that Skellig is found at the start of the book wearing a suit. Okay, that suggests some kind of event that he went to just before he decided to retreat into himself and to go and sit in Michael's garage for as long as he was allowed to do so without being disturbed. So you're going to need to think of what that is and write about it, and essentially take him from being someone living some kind of life out there with the public to someone who just closes off altogether. We don't know how long you're going to have to write this, but I think you should allow yourself 2 days at least to try and get this done. You've got to make sure you consider what his life was like before and what went wrong and how he ends up just sat there in Michael's garage. You may also want to consider how long he's been there for. Okay, it could be plenty of years. That garage is very old, and Ernie Myers, the man who lived there before him, lived there for a very long time. So it would be perfectly reasonable to be counting back in decades rather than just years, which may also give your story quite an interesting flavour if you set it in a particular decade. Anyway, the rest of it is down to your creativity, and we will certainly be very interested to see what you come up with. Good luck.